Hello everybody and welcome to another Brain Attack music video with me, Andy. Be grateful if you could subscribe by clicking on the subscribe icon below. This is the first of a two-parter on stress, and what I'd like to do in this one, the first part, is to talk about the effects of stress, actually what it is and what effects it has on us. Well, stress is actually a reaction or response that we have to a perceived threat. And it's something that originates deep in the primeval part of the brain. So it's something that's been around before us, before modern man, before Homo sapiens. We've been around 250,000 years, something like that. But our stress response goes back way further to our ancestors. So it's something that's millions of years old, and it's designed to get us out of stressful situations. So imagine our ancestors wandering about the savannas of Africa or wherever it was, they were wandering around Europe, wherever, and they came across a saber-toothed tiger. They would need some kind of reaction to that, and the reaction to that would be what we now call our flight or fight response. Get out, quick, or fight. And that is our stress response, something that has been there inside of us for millions of years. So this stress response begins in our brains. And what happens is that our amygdala, or technically amygdalae because there are two of them, is aware of a perceived threat. And the amygdalae trigger the hypothalamus to release hormones. It's actually a hormonal response to a perceived threat. And this all happens really quickly. We don't think about it, it just happens. The hypothalamus is triggered, and it itself triggers the autonomic nervous system. Now, the autonomic nervous system is located in the brainstem, and its job is to regulate and manage all the things that happen automatically, hence the name, autonomic nervous system. So things like breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, things that happen when we're asleep is the easiest way to think of it. That's the job of the autonomic nervous system. Now, the autonomic nervous system has two parts. There's the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And the sympathetic acts like kind of an accelerator pedal on the car. That's to get us going. And the parasympathetic acts like a brake. That's to kind of rein back and stop the car, as it were. So the hypothalamus triggers the sympathetic nervous system, which pumps, amongst other things, adrenaline straight into the bloodstream. So what this does inevitably is it increases our heart rate, increases our blood pressure, energizes, for want of a better expression, our blood, increases our heart rate, increases our breathing. Basically, it's gearing us up for fighting or running away. And in addition to this, our small airways in the lungs start to open up to allow more oxygen in, to feed our lungs with more oxygen, again as part of the flight or fight response. And as well as this, glucose, sugar, gets released into the bloodstream to provide more energy. So there's a whole load of things going on just when we have, a perceived threat. All of this kicks into action, designed to help us deal with the threat, the danger. Now, some of you may identify with this, you may or may not, I don't know. But one of the other things the body does is it tries to make us lighter, because the lighter we are, the quicker we can run away. The lighter we are, the more mobile we are for dealing with the issue. And as part of that, trying to make us lighter, another side effect, for want of a better expression, of the whole fight or flight response is to empty our bladders and evacuate our bowels. Now, just as an aside, a key tell for me when I'm getting anxious or stressed is the number of times I need to go to the toilet. To the extent that if we've got a long journey planned and there's something at the end of it that's making me anxious, like a hospital appointment or whatever, I will need to plan the route so that there are places we can stop where I can relieve the pressure on my bladder. And I will actually not drink anything probably for a couple of hours before we leave in order to help that situation. It's just one of my tells. It's just what happens. Coincidentally, I used to work with a singer, a lady singer, who suffered from really, really bad stage fright. And normally about half an hour before we were due to go on stage, she would have to take herself off and go to the toilet. And this became a kind of running joke in the band. As you can imagine, 4 guys and a lady. Unfortunately, she did have the mickey taken out of her somewhat. But she was getting stressed, she was getting anxious, and it had an effect on her metabolism. Now, as I said earlier, all of this happens really, really quickly. So it's something that's kind of automatic. We don't actually think about it. It's all controlled, triggered automatically by our brains, our amygdala, when we sense that there's some kind of threat. Traditionally, this would have been when we were out hunting and gathering. Now, if this threat is sensed over a period of time, a few minutes, after the initial surge of adrenaline, another system kicks in called the HPA axis. I won't bother you too much about what that is, but it's another whole load of hormones, primarily cortisol, which gets released. So this is to keep the accelerator pedal pressed down. After the initial surge of adrenaline, cortisol is then released to keep that accelerator pedal down. So this is kind of the second stage of the process. And ideally, when we sense that that threat has passed, then the parasympathetic system kicks in and puts its foot on the brake and stops all of this hormonal activity from taking place. Now, there's an issue here for us in our modern world, which is what happens if that threat hangs around, or that perceived threat hangs around a bit longer, what we might call chronic low-level stress. Well, what happens here is that it's a bit like a car engine which is idling too quickly. So our system keeps topping up with the adrenaline and the cortisol because it's still sensing the stress. And as I say, in modern parlance, we would call this chronic low-level stress. Now, if we have this persistent chronic low-level stress, or we have repeated surges of adrenaline, we're having the main system triggered on a regular basis, not good for our health. As you can imagine, all this stimulation to our cardiovascular system will ultimately start damaging our blood vessels and our arteries, will elevate our blood pressure, and will increase our risk of heart attacks and strokes. But as well as that, cortisol actually increases our appetite, because what's happening is we're using up our energy reserves, is getting fed into the system in order to fight or flight, and we deplete our internal energy reserves. So our appetite gets increased and we tend to put on weight. So another effect of chronic low-level stress, as well as the issues with our cardiovascular system, can be weight gain. And it's kind of a double whammy, because our body's going, oh wow, I've used all this energy up, I now need to store what I'm getting. So it tends to convert what it's being fed into fat, just in case it needs it in the future. So all of this is going on simply because of a perceived threat that our ancient system has detected. And of course it's designed for fighting a battle. It's not designed for fighting a war. It's not designed for anything long term. It's designed for something short term, because that's what it was designed for originally, back in the day, over millions of years ago. And in the modern world, it's actually a bit of a bad thing, because we have a lot of stress in the modern world. Okay, it's not life-threatening. When was the last time you felt threatened by your life, for your life? But when was the last time you had some financial worries? When was the last time you had some relationship worries? When was the last time you had some career, work-related worries? When was the last time your car developed a problem? Etc., etc. So all of these events in our lives contribute to our stress levels, and probably for most of us in the developed world contribute towards chronic low-level stress. So in part 2, I'm going to look at what happens in the modern world, what's going on in our modern world that's contributing towards this chronic low-level stress, and what we can do about it. So thanks for watching, and part 2 coming up in a week or two's time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye now.